As the first raindrop splattered against my windshield, I glanced at the clock. 11:03 p.m. I sighed, the fatigue of a long day at the office weighing heavily on my shoulders. The highway ahead stretched out like a black ribbon, slick and glistening under the rain that had begun to fall in earnest. The rhythmic thudding of the wipers was almost hypnotic, urging me to close my eyes, if only for a moment. But I couldn't. Not on this road. Not at this hour. The road was eerily empty, the only other vehicles occasional shadows that seemed to disappear as quickly as they appeared. The rain intensified, and visibility dropped. I slowed down, gripping the steering wheel tighter, the knuckles of my hands turning white. Each gust of wind seemed to shake the car, adding to the sense of isolation that was beginning to creep in. The old two-lane road I was driving on was notorious for its sharp curves and steep drops. Local legends called it Devil's Bend. As a kid, I'd heard stories of ghostly hitchhikers, phantom cars, and drivers who vanished without a trace. I never put much stock in those tales, but tonight, with the rain falling like a curtain of icy needles, the stories felt disturbingly plausible. The radio sputtered with static before cutting off entirely. I reached to adjust the dial, hoping to find a station, any station, to break the suffocating silence. But all I got was more static. With a sigh, I gave up and let the silence take over, the only sound the relentless rain hammering against the car and the wipers' futile battle. I was just about to take the next curve when I saw it, a figure standing by the side of the road. At first, I thought it was an illusion, a trick of the rain and darkness. But as I drew closer, the figure became clearer. A woman, drenched and shivering, her clothes clinging to her as if they were a second skin. She raised a hand, a desperate, pleading gesture. I hesitated. Every horror movie I'd ever seen screamed at me to keep driving, but I couldn't just leave her there. I pulled over, the tires skidding slightly on the wet asphalt. She hurried to the passenger side and climbed in without a word, her presence bringing a rush of cold, damp air into the car. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think anyone would stop. I nodded, turning the heat up. "No problem. Where are you headed?" "Anywhere but here," she replied, her voice trembling. "Just, please, get me away from this place." I glanced at her, her face partially obscured by wet strands of hair. There was something unsettling about her eyes, wide and dark, like twin abysses. But I shrugged it off as a trick of the dim light and my own exhaustion. I pulled back onto the road, the tires spraying water as they found traction. We drove in silence for a few miles, the tension in the car growing thicker with each passing minute. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I glanced at her again, noticing how still she was, almost as if she weren't there at all. "Were you in an accident?" I asked, trying to break the silence. She shook her head slowly. "No. I was running." "From what?" She didn't answer, her eyes staring straight ahead. A chill ran down my spine. I focused on the road, but my mind raced with questions. What was she running from? Why was she out there alone in the middle of the night? We reached a particularly sharp bend, and I slowed down, the car's headlights struggling to cut through the dense curtain of rain. As we rounded the curve, the car's headlights illuminated something that made my blood run cold, a mangled wreck of a car, its metal twisted and torn, resting precariously on the edge of a steep drop. "Is that?" I began, but the words died in my throat as I turned to look at my passenger. She was gone. The seat was empty, water dripping onto the floor where she had sat. Panic surged through me. I pulled over, heart pounding, and got out, the rain drenching me instantly. I called out, but there was no response. I ran to the wreck, peering inside, but it was empty. The driver's side door hung open, and there were no signs of anyone, dead or alive. Drenched and shivering, I returned to my car. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, a trick of the light and my tired mind. I had to get off this road, find somewhere safe and dry. I started the car and drove, my hands trembling on the wheel. The road seemed endless, the rain unrelenting. Every shadow, every flicker of movement at the edge of my vision made my heart race. I kept glancing at the passenger seat, half expecting to see her there again. Finally, I saw the faint glow of the diner's neon sign through the rain. I pulled into the parking lot, my relief palpable. The diner looked like a haven of warmth and light in the midst of the storm. I parked and stumbled inside, my clothes clinging to me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The waitress behind the counter looked up, her expression shifting from boredom to concern. "Rough night?" "You could say that," I replied, sinking into a booth. "Coffee, please." She nodded and brought me a steaming mug. I wrapped my hands around it, savoring the warmth. The other patrons were few and far between, mostly truckers and late-night travelers. I tried to calm my racing heart, but the events of the night kept replaying in my mind. As I sat there, the door to the diner opened, and a figure stepped in, shaking off the rain. I froze, the mug halfway to my lips. It was her, the woman from the road. She walked in, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, not waiting for an answer as she slid into the booth across from me. "How?" I stammered, but she cut me off. "You can't escape," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You picked me up. Now you're part of it." "Part of what?" I demanded, fear turning to anger. "The curse," she replied, her eyes boring into mine. "Anyone who helps me is doomed to take my place. You'll be the one standing by the road next time, waiting for a kind soul to pick you up. And when they do, you'll vanish, just like I did." I shook my head, refusing to believe it. "No. This is insane." She leaned closer, her face inches from mine. "It's real. And there's no way out." With that, she stood and walked out of the diner, disappearing into the rain. I sat there, stunned, my mind racing. It couldn't be true. It had to be a trick, a cruel joke. But as the hours passed and the rain continued to fall, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled over me. I knew, deep down, that she was right. I was trapped, bound to the road and the curse that haunted it. And now, as I sit here, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to pick me up, I can only hope they'll find a way to break the cycle. Because if they don't, I'll be standing by that road forever, a silent, ghostly figure in the rain, waiting for the next kind soul to join me in the endless night.